I'm writing this because if I don't get it down while it's still sharp, I'm going to start sanding off the corners to make it easier to live with. People do that. They turn something ugly into a story they can tell at dinner. They add little breaks and little jokes and little explanations. They make it sound like it had a beginning and an end, like it behaved. This didn't behave. If someone finds this after I'm gone, or if you're reading it because it ended up in some file, don't go looking for the place. It's not a haunted house for tourists kind of thing. It's a normal building with scuffed paint and a busted intercom and a hallway that always smells like someone's cooking onions. It's the kind of place where your neighbors' lives leak into yours through thin walls. The kind of place where the elevator groans and the stairwell is always just a little too warm. Or it was. My name is Daniel. I'm 32. I do building maintenance because it's steady and I'm good with my hands. I'm not a tough guy and I'm not a hero. I don't know weapons. I don't have some special knowledge about ghosts. I change locks and unclog drains and patch drywall. I carry a ring of keys and a cheap flashlight. That's it. The building is on the edge of the city, where the new cafes stop and the old stuff starts. Little warehouses turned into apartments, pawn shops, empty lots with fences that get patched with zip ties. The building is 6 floors, old brick, with a courtyard that used to be a garden before it got paved over for garbage bins, and a bike rack that no one trusts. I started the job in late summer. The first few weeks were the usual. Tenants complaining about mold, the old boiler throwing fits, a guy on the 4th floor who kept flushing wipes and swearing he wasn't. I learned names fast because that's part of the job. You need to know who's likely to scream at you and who's going to offer you coffee. There was a woman named Lydia on the 2nd floor who ran a daycare out of her apartment, even though she wasn't supposed to. You could tell when she was home because you'd hear little feet and songs and her voice counting. A couple lived across from her, Mara and Jonas. They fought quietly, the kind of fighting where the words are low and sharp and the damage is done by what's not said. 3rd floor had Mr. Feld, a retired bus driver with a bad knee and a habit of taking the stairs anyway. 4th floor had a guy named Rami, who fixed phones and always had a soldering iron going on his kitchen table. 5th floor had twins, college kids, always in and out with friends and bags of cheap groceries. And then there was the empty unit. Unit 1B, ground floor, end of the hall. It had been empty before I came, and the owner liked it that way. No headaches, he said when I asked. I'll rent it when I feel like dealing with people. The door to 1B looked like every other door, beige, chipped at the bottom, peephole scratched from years of keys and rings and someone's dog. But the air around it was different, not in a poetic way, not cold spots and whispering. More like the smell was wrong. At first I thought it was plumbing. Old buildings have dead smells. You open a wall and you get a breath of rot from a leak that's been feeding a patch of mold for months. I've dealt with that. This was cleaner than that. Sharp and thick. Like the inside of a meat fridge that lost power. The smell would be there one day and gone the next. I checked the basement drain traps. I checked the garbage chute. I checked behind the vending machine in the lobby. I even crawled into the little crawl space under the stairs and stuck my head into dust and spider webs. Nothing. The first time I really noticed it, it was because of Mr. Feld. I was swapping a light fixture in the stairwell when he came up behind me, breathing hard, gripping the railing. He was proud of taking the stairs, but his knee was bad and he moved slow. "You smell that?" he asked. I turned and the smell hit me like I'd opened a bag of old chicken. It was coming from the hall, right where 1B sat. "Yeah," I said. "I've been trying to track it down." He stared down the hallway. His eyes narrowed like he was trying to focus on something far away. "That's not garbage," he said. "No," I admitted. He shook his head once. "When I was driving the bus, I hit a deer on the highway. Went right under. Took days to get the stench out. Smelled like that." I didn't like hearing him say it. I didn't like how sure he sounded. I told him I'd put in a work order to check 1B's plumbing. That was a lie. There was no tenant. There was no work order system. It was me and my notebook and the owner who only answered emails once a week. Mr. Feld kept looking down the hall. "Someone in there?" he asked. "No," I said. "It's empty." He didn't argue. He just watched for another beat, like he expected the door to breathe. That night, at home, I couldn't get the smell out of my nose. My apartment is 3 miles away in a different building, but the scent stuck to me like smoke. I showered. I scrubbed my hands with dish soap. I changed my shirt. When I lay down, I kept picturing a door that didn't open, and behind it something stacked up in the dark. The next morning I went early. I told myself I was being responsible. I told myself it was probably a dead rat in the wall or a sink trap dried out. I also told myself that if I waited, it would get worse and someone would complain, and I'd look like I wasn't doing my job. The hallway was quiet. The building was quiet in that early hour when people are either at work or asleep. The fluorescent lights hummed. The carpet runner had a dark stain in front of 2A, where someone once spilled something and never cleaned it. And the smell was there, stronger than before. It was like the air had been soaking in it overnight. I went to the basement first and got the key ring with the master keys. There's a master for each floor, and a separate one for storage and one for the boiler room. The key for 1B was supposed to be on that ring, but it wasn't. That alone should have told me to stop. Keys go missing all the time in my job. People borrow them and forget. The owner pockets them. Someone drops one down a drain. But 1B didn't have a tenant. Nobody should have needed that key. I checked my own ring. Nothing. I went to the office in the lobby where we keep the spare lock cylinders and the old mailroom keys. The drawer was unlocked like always, because nobody thinks to steal lock parts. The envelope labeled 1B was empty. I stood there staring at the envelope like I could make a key appear by being patient. I should have emailed the owner right then. I should have waited for him to respond. I should have called someone. The police, maybe. Or at least the property manager who sometimes pretended to care. Instead, I went back down the hall with a screwdriver and a small pry bar. I've opened plenty of doors that weren't cooperating. Old locks swell. Deadbolts stick. Tenants change cylinders without telling anyone. Usually it's a quick job, a bit of pressure, a scrape of metal, the satisfying click. This door didn't give. The knob didn't move. The deadbolt was set, but there was something else holding it, like a second lock on the inside. The door itself felt heavier than it should have, like there was weight pressing against it from the other side. The smell came in waves. Each time I leaned in to look at the lock, it hit me in the back of the throat and made my eyes water. I slid the pry bar into the gap. The paint cracked with a soft pop. I set my shoulder to the door. The first shove didn't do anything. The second shove made the door jump an inch. On the third, something inside scraped across the floor, slow, like furniture being dragged. Not a sudden scrape, not a panicked movement, a measured, patient pull. I froze with my hand on the knob. The hallway was still. I could hear the fluorescent hum, and far away, someone's shower running on the third floor. I put my ear to the door. There was breathing. Not loud, not gasping, just steady, like someone standing close and breathing through their mouth. My skin went tight. I backed away until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. I wanted to tell myself it was pipes, but I know pipes. I know the way old buildings hiss and knock. This wasn't that. This was a person's breath. I stared at the peephole, the scratchy lens, a tiny eye into darkness. I don't know what I expected to see. A face, a shadow, movement. I leaned in. On the other side of the peephole was an eye. Not a face behind it. Not someone peeking. Just an eye pressed right up to the lens, filling the circle like a coin. It was too big. The white around it was too wide, as if the lids were pulled back by invisible hooks. The pupil was dark and flat. The iris was pale, almost washed out, like watered-down ink. And it didn't blink. I jerked back hard enough to smack my head on the wall. Pain flashed behind my eyes. For a second, I just stood there with my mouth open, tasting that death-sour air. Then the doorknob turned. It turned slowly, like someone had all the time in the world. The latch clicked. The door pulled inward the inch I'd forced it. The gap opened like a mouth. What came out first wasn't a hand. It was the smell. It rolled out thick and warm, like breath from a body that had been sealed up. It made me gag. My stomach clenched. Then I saw pale skin in the gap, a forearm, hairless and white, almost the color of raw dough, fingers that were too long, joints wrong. The hand gripped the edge of the door and pulled it wider. I didn't wait to see more. I ran. I ran down the hall toward the stairwell, keys clattering against my thigh. Behind me, the door scraped as it opened further, and I heard a sound that wasn't a footstep and wasn't a drag. It was the soft, wet sound of something sliding over carpet. I hit the stairwell door and shoved it open. The air in the stairwell was hot and smelled like dust and old paint. I stumbled down the first flight, missed a step, caught myself on the railing. I didn't look back. I heard something behind me anyway. It wasn't fast. That was the part that made it worse. It didn't chase like an animal. It followed like it knew I couldn't go anywhere else. A wet shuffle, a slow scrape, and underneath it, that steady mouth breathing. I hit the first floor landing and pushed out into the lobby. The lobby was empty. Early morning light bled through the front windows, turning the cheap tile floor gray. I ran behind the reception desk, grabbed the cordless phone, and punched 911 with shaking fingers. My voice came out thin. I told the operator there was someone inside an empty unit. I told her the door had been locked from the inside and my key was missing. I told her something was wrong. She asked for the address. I gave it. She asked if the person had threatened me. I said I'd seen an eye at the peephole. There was a pause. "Sir," she said carefully, "did the person say anything?" "No," I said. It looked at me. "Are you in immediate danger now?" I looked over the desk toward the hall. The hallway was out of sight around the corner. "I don't know," I said. "She told me to stay where I was. She told me officers were on the way. I stayed." The lobby clock ticked. The building's old radiator pinged with heat. Somewhere above me, someone shut a cabinet door. Normal sounds, domestic sounds. Then the smell crept into the lobby. It came slow, like fog. It slid along the tile and under the office door and into my throat. My mouth went dry. I held the phone tighter. And then, from the hallway, I heard a laugh. Not loud, not manic, just a low sound, like someone amused, like someone watching a mistake unfold exactly the way they wanted. The operator kept talking, asking me to describe the person, asking me to stay calm. I couldn't answer, because a face appeared around the corner. It was pale, not just light-skinned. Pale like it had never had blood. Pale like bone. The eyes were huge, too wide open. I could see the wet shine of the whites all the way around the pupils. The eyes didn't track like normal eyes. They just stared straight ahead, unblinking, as if blinking was something it had never learned. And the mouth. The mouth was stretched into a smile that didn't fit the face. The corners were pulled so far back it looked painful, but it didn't look like pain. It looked like effort, like the face had been trained into that shape. The jaw hung open inside the smile, not slack, open on purpose. A dark hole with teeth that looked too clean. It stood there in the doorway to the hall. Still, the way people stand when they want you to see them, when they want you to understand that they are here. Its clothes were wrong. Not old-fashioned, not ghostly sheets. Just a plain dark jacket and pants, like something you'd buy at a discount store. But the fabric looked damp at the cuffs, as if it had been dragged through something wet. The smell hit full force when it stepped into the lobby. It was the stink of spoiled meat and sick and old pennies. It made my eyes water again. I wanted to move. I couldn't. The operator was still in my ear. "Sir, are you there? Can you see the person now?" I whispered, "Yes." The thing's head tilted slightly, as if listening, but the eyes didn't change. The smile didn't change. It took one step, not toward me, toward the front door. It walked like it wasn't used to gravity, like its joints were too loose. The movement was smooth in the wrong way, like a puppet pulled by strings. It reached the front door and pressed its palm to the glass. The glass fogged under its hand. I could see smears on the inside of the door, old fingerprints from tenants and kids. Its handprint went over them like frost. Then it turned back to me, still smiling, still not blinking. And it spoke. It wasn't a voice from a movie. It wasn't a whisper. It was a normal voice, like a man's voice, a little hoarse, like someone who'd been sick. "Daniel," it said, My stomach dropped. I hadn't told it my name. The operator said, "Sir, did it say something?" I didn't answer. My throat was locked. The thing's smile widened, which I didn't think was possible, but it did. The skin at the corners of its mouth split slightly, thin cracks that darkened with wet. "Open," it said. It nodded toward the desk drawer where the spare front door key lived. The building's front door lock was old and finicky. We kept a key behind the desk in case the mechanism jammed. My hand shook over the drawer. I told myself if I opened the door, it would leave. I told myself that was better than it coming around the desk. But the way it said "open" wasn't a request. It wasn't even an order. It was like naming a fact. My fingers curled around the drawer handle. The operator's voice was tight now. "Sir, do not approach the person. Officers are..." The thing took another step. My body moved without my permission. I yanked the drawer open. I grabbed the key. I stood up. The lobby felt too small. The air was thick with that dead smell. I walked to the front door like I was walking to the gallows. The thing watched me the whole time. Not a blink. Not a twitch. I put the key in the lock. My hand slipped on the metal. The key turned. The lock clicked. I pulled the door open. Cold morning air rushed in, clean and sharp. It should have been a relief. It wasn't, because I saw what was outside. The street was empty. Not empty like early morning quiet. Empty like the world had been paused. No cars, no joggers, no dog walkers, no wind in the trees. The traffic light at the corner stayed green and green and green without anyone to see it. The sound of the city was gone. The thing stepped through the doorway. For a second, its outline blurred against the light, like heat shimmer. Then it was on the sidewalk, still smiling, still staring. It lifted its head and breathed in. The smell from it mixed with the clean air and made something new and worse. It turned back toward me. "Work," it said. It pointed a long finger at my chest. Then it pointed down the hall behind me. The meaning landed like a brick. It wasn't leaving. It was telling me my job. It stepped back inside, and the world outside, the paused street, stayed paused. I slammed the door shut without thinking, locked it, and backed away. My heart hammered. The phone had gone dead at some point. The operator was gone. There was only the lobby and the hallway and the thing. It started walking toward the hall. I followed without wanting to. I can't explain why. I can't say it hypnotized me or controlled me. That sounds like an excuse. It was simpler and worse. I was terrified, and in that terror my brain grabbed at the only rule it could find. The rule was, do what it says. It moved down the hall toward the stairs. As it walked, the smell stayed behind it like a trail. At the stairwell door, it paused and looked up, like it could see through floors. Then it started climbing. It didn't take the stairs like a person. It didn't lift its feet fully. It slid them up, the soles scraping, the sound soft and wet. The railing didn't creak under its hand because it didn't touch the railing. I climbed behind it. One step back, not close enough to reach. not far enough to run. Halfway to the second floor, I heard a door open above us. Lydia's door. I heard a child laugh, a little squeal of joy. My mouth filled with saliva like I was going to throw up. I wanted to shout. I wanted to warn her. My voice didn't come. We reached the second floor landing. Lydia stood in her doorway with a toddler on her hip. She wore sweatpants and a shirt with cartoon animals on it. Her hair was pulled back messy. Her face was soft with that morning tiredness. "Daniel," she said, surprised. "What's going on? The lights in the hall." She stopped because she saw it. The toddler on her hip went quiet. Lydia's eyes flicked from the thing's face to its open mouth to its eyes. "Who is that?" she asked. The thing didn't answer. It took one more step. Lydia started to back into her apartment. Her hand tightened on the child. "Hey," she said louder. "No, stop. Daniel." The thing moved. It moved faster than it had before, but not like a sprint, like a cut in a film. One moment it was by the stairwell door. The next moment it was in front of Lydia. Its hand went into her doorway like it was reaching into a drawer. Lydia screamed. The toddler screamed too, high and thin. The thing grabbed Lydia by the face, not by the throat, by the face, palm over her mouth and nose, fingers splayed up into her hairline. It pushed. Lydia's head snapped back against the doorframe with a sound like a melon hitting concrete. Her body went limp for a second. The toddler slipped from her hip and hit the floor, crying. I shouted then. I don't remember choosing to. It tore out of me. "Stop!" The thing's eyes didn't move toward me. It didn't need to. It knew I was there. It pulled Lydia out into the hall by her face, dragging her like a bag. Her heels bumped over the threshold. Her arms flailed weakly. She made a wet, choking sound under its hand. The toddler crawled toward her, wailing. The thing looked down at the child, and for the first time, I saw something like interest in its posture, not in its face. The face didn't change, but the tilt of its head was different, like it was examining a toy. It released Lydia's face. She sagged against the wall, half conscious, blood running from her scalp into her eyebrow. The thing reached down and lifted the toddler by one arm. The child's body hung, kicking. Lydia tried to grab the child. Her hand slipped on the wall. "Please," she said. It came out as a rasp. "Please." The thing held the toddler up to its open mouth, not to bite, not to eat. That would have been simple. It held the child close enough that the child's crying went straight into that dark mouth. The toddler's face was inches from the thing's teeth. The smell of death wrapped around the child. The toddler's cry turned into choking sobs. Lydia clawed at the thing's sleeve. She grabbed fabric and pulled. The thing let the toddler go. The child fell. Lydia lunged and caught the toddler against her chest. She sobbed, rocking, trying to stand. In that moment, one heartbeat, hope flared in me. It had spared them. It had stopped. Then the thing placed its hands on Lydia's shoulders. Gentle, almost careful, and it pulled. Lydia's head didn't come off clean like in movies. Real bodies don't do that. Skin and muscle and tendons hold on. The neck stretches. The face changes. The sound is not dramatic. It's a horrible wet tearing, mixed with the sharp crack of bone. Lydia's mouth opened wide in a sound that never fully formed. Her eyes rolled. The toddler screamed and screamed. The thing kept pulling until something gave. There was a snap. Lydia's head twisted at an angle that no neck can survive. Her body buckled. She collapsed in a heap on the carpet runner, still holding the child, arms locked by the last reflex. Blood spread out under her, dark and fast. The toddler was trapped in her arms, face pressed into her chest. The child kept screaming until the screams turned into gasps. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The thing crouched. It put a finger under Lydia's chin and lifted her face. Her eyes were open but empty. The thing's own eyes stared into hers, unblinking. Then it turned its head toward me. It didn't have to speak. The message was clear. Watch. I made a sound like a sob. The thing reached into Lydia's arms and peeled the toddler free. The child fought, tiny fists hitting the thing's wrists. The child's hair was wet with blood. The thing held the child on its lap like a parent would. Then it put both hands on the child's cheeks. For a second it looked like it might comfort the child. Instead, it opened its own mouth wider. I didn't know mouths could open that wide. The jaw stretched, the hinge going beyond normal, skin pulling tight. It leaned forward and pressed its open mouth over the child's face. Not biting, sealing. The child's scream muffled. The thing held its mouth there, like it was inhaling the sound. The child's legs kicked. The hands clawed at the thing's cheeks. The thing didn't blink. The kicking slowed. The clawing turned weak. Then the child went still. The thing lifted its head. The toddler's face was wrong. It wasn't chewed. It wasn't torn. It was pale, as if all the warmth had been sucked out in one pull. The eyes were open and glazed. The thing's mouth stayed open, the smile unchanged. A thin line of blood ran from the corner of its mouth like drool. It set the child down next to Lydia's body like placing an object. Then it stood and looked up the stairs again. It started climbing. I stood there with my hands shaking, staring at the bodies on the landing. Lydia's apartment door stood open behind them. Inside, I could see toys scattered on the floor, a tiny table with crayons, a pot on the stove with something boiling over, making a weak hiss. Normal life still going on, as if it didn't know. The smell of death was everywhere. My stomach heaved. I turned and vomited into the stairwell corner. It splattered on the concrete. The sound echoed. The thing didn't react. It kept going up. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and followed, because my legs did it even while my brain screamed. On the third floor, Mr. Feld was out in the hall with a trash bag, heading toward the chute. He saw me first. "Daniel," he started, like he was about to complain about the lights. Then he saw it. His mouth fell open. He dropped the trash bag. It hit the carpet with a soft thud. "What the hell?" he said. The thing stopped in front of him. Mr. Feld's hands went up, palms out. "No," he said, stepping back. "No way." His voice wasn't brave. It was a man who knows his knee won't carry him fast. He turned to run anyway. He made it 2 steps. The thing reached out and caught him by the back of the shirt. It yanked. Mr. Feld fell backward hard. The back of his head hit the carpeted floor with a dull thump. His glasses skittered away. He tried to roll, to crawl. The thing stepped onto his chest. Not a light step. A full weight. Mr. Feld wheezed. His hands scrabbled at the thing's ankle. The thing leaned forward, still smiling, and put its hands on Mr. Feld's jaw. Mr. Feld tried to scream, but it came out as a wet rasp. The thing pulled his jaw open. People can open their mouths wide. You can dislocate your jaw. You can force it. But there's a limit. The thing didn't care about limits. It pulled until the corners of Mr. Feld's mouth tore. Skin split. Blood ran down his chin. Mr. Feld's eyes bulged. Tears streamed. The thing kept pulling. There was a crack, sharp and loud. Bone. Mr. Feld's mouth hung open too far, slack and ruined. He made a bubbling sound. The thing's hands slid inside Mr. Feld's mouth. I can't make that sentence feel real, but that's what happened. Fingers went in past teeth, past tongue. It gripped something inside. It pulled. Mr. Feld's whole body jerked. His legs kicked. The sound that came out of him was a gurgle that turned into nothing. The thing pulled again. Something came out. Not a neat organ like in a textbook. A wet rope of tissue, stretching, tearing. Mr. Feld's eyes rolled back. The thing held what it had pulled out for a moment, like it was showing me, like it wanted me to see what a human is inside. Then it dropped it onto Mr. Feld's chest. It stepped off him. Mr. Feld lay there with his mouth open in a broken oval, blood pooling, throat collapsed. The thing looked at him for another second, unblinking. Then it walked away, up the stairs. I stood frozen, my own mouth open, tasting bile. Mr. Feld's fingers twitched once, then stopped. I wanted to run. I wanted to grab my phone. I wanted to do anything that wasn't climbing stairs behind the thing. But my legs kept moving. By the time we reached the 4th floor, the building had started waking up. A door opened. Someone stepped into the hall in a bathrobe. Mara. She saw Mr. Feld's body on the stairs below us. She screamed. Her scream cut off when she saw the thing. Jonas appeared behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What is it?" he asked. Mara pointed, shaking. Jonas's face tightened. He was bigger than me, broad shoulders, the kind of guy who thinks he can handle things with force. He stepped into the hall, putting himself between Mara and the thing. "Hey," he said, voice loud, trying to sound in control. "You need to get the hell out of here." The thing stopped. Jonas took another step. "Did you do that?" He jerked his chin toward the stairs. "What are you, high? Get out." The thing's smile stayed open. Its eyes stayed wide. Jonas reached for it. His hand didn't land. The thing moved just enough, and Jonas's hand grabbed empty air. Jonas swore and swung his fist. This time the thing let the fist connect. Jonas hit it in the cheek. It should have hurt. It should have bruised. It should have at least made it flinch. The thing didn't react. Jonas's knuckles came away smeared with something dark, like old blood. Jonas stared at his own hand, confused. The thing leaned in close, like it was going to kiss him, and inhaled. Jonas's face changed. His eyes widened. He gagged. The smell hit him full. He stumbled back, coughing. Mara tried to pull him into the apartment. "Jonas, get inside. Get inside." Jonas coughed harder, bent over. The thing stepped forward. It put its hand on Jonas's back, almost friendly. Jonas coughed again, and blood sprayed from his mouth onto the carpet. He straightened in shock. He coughed again. More blood, thicker. Mara screamed and grabbed his shoulders. Jonas opened his mouth to speak. Something black and wet slid out. At first I thought it was vomit. Then I realized it was moving. It was coming out of his throat like a thick slug, like something crawling its way up. Jonas's eyes went wide with panic. He clawed at his own mouth. The black thing kept sliding out, longer than it should have been, glistening. Jonas made a choking sound. The thing watched with that open smile. Mara tried to pull the black thing out of Jonas's mouth. Her fingers sank into it like jelly. The black thing snapped. Not like an animal snapping its jaws. It tightened like a cord. Mara's fingers bent wrong. She screamed. Jonas's body jerked. The black thing inside him tightened again. Jonas's neck bulged. Then his head jerked forward, hard, like a puppet yanked. His forehead hit the wall. Crack. He slumped, still choking, blood and black slime spilling. Mara fell to her knees, trying to hold him up. "Jonas! Jonas! Please!" The thing stepped around them and into their doorway. Mara saw it and screamed again, trying to block the door. The thing didn't push her aside. It simply stepped through her. I don't mean it passed by her. I mean its body moved through the space her body occupied, like she was fog. Mara's scream turned into a strangled gasp. She clutched her stomach. Blood poured between her fingers. She looked down, eyes wide with disbelief. A split opened across her middle, clean as if cut by a wire. Her robe fell open. Her insides didn't spill out all at once. They slid, slow, heavy, like a bag being emptied. Mara toppled onto her side, still trying to hold herself together with her hands. Her eyes stayed open as she died. Jonas made one last choking sound and went still. Inside the apartment, I heard a dog barking, a frantic yapping. The thing walked deeper into the apartment. The barking stopped. The silence that followed was worse than screams. The thing came back out a minute later. Its hands were wet. It looked at me, and for the first time, I understood something. It wanted me alive. It wanted me present. It wanted an audience. It pointed up. 5th floor. I shook my head, tears leaking out without me noticing. "No," I whispered. It didn't respond. It started up the stairs. I followed. On the 5th floor, the twins' door was open. Music thumped softly inside, the kind of late-night playlist that bleeds into morning. One of the twins, the girl, was in the doorway holding a mug. She looked annoyed. "Can you guys keep it down?" She called down the hall, not seeing the bodies behind me yet. "Some of us have exams." Then her eyes found the blood on the stairs. Her face drained. "What?" she started. The thing stepped into view. She froze. From inside the apartment, the other twin, the boy, called, "What's going on?" He walked up behind her. He saw the thing. He saw the blood. He swore. "What the hell is this?" He reached for his phone. The thing moved its head slightly, like it was curious. The boy lifted the phone, thumb ready to dial. The phone screen went black. He hit the button. Nothing. He stared at it, confused. The thing took one step closer. The girl backed up, pulling her brother with her. "No," she said. "No, no." They retreated into the apartment. The thing followed. I stood at the threshold. Inside, their apartment looked like every student apartment. Clothes on chairs, textbooks stacked, cheap art on the walls, the smell of instant noodles and body spray. The thing's death stink polluted it instantly. The twins backed toward the kitchen. The boy grabbed a knife from the counter, a cheap serrated one. He held it out, hand shaking. "Stay back." The thing didn't react. The boy swung the knife. The blade went into the thing's side. It should have stopped there, caught on ribs. It sank in like the body was soft. The boy's eyes widened. "I got you," he said, almost relieved. The thing looked down at the knife. Then it looked back up, still smiling. The boy tried to pull the knife out. The thing put its hand over his. It guided the boy's hand, gentle, almost instructive. It pushed the knife deeper. The boy gasped. The thing turned the knife handle, twisting. The boy screamed. Then the thing pulled the knife out and handed it back to him, handle first, like returning a tool. The boy took it without thinking. The girl sobbed. "Please," she said. "Please don't." The thing tilted its head. Then it stepped toward the girl. The boy lunged, shouting. The knife went forward. The thing caught the boy's wrist. It squeezed. I heard bones crack. The boy screamed and dropped the knife. The thing didn't let go. It squeezed again. The boy's forearm bent at a wrong angle. Skin split. Blood ran. The boy's scream turned into a whimper. The thing lifted the boy by the broken arm like lifting a child. It swung him. It swung him into the kitchen counter. The impact was sickening. The boy's head hit the edge. His body folded. He slid to the floor, eyes open, mouth working soundlessly. The girl tried to run past the thing toward the living room. The thing stepped into her path. She stopped, cornered. She raised her hands. "I'm sorry," she said, like apologizing could fix it. The thing reached out and touched her cheek with one finger. It traced down to her jaw. Then it hooked its finger into the corner of her mouth. The girl flinched. The thing pulled. Her skin stretched. She cried out. The thing pulled harder. The corner of her mouth tore. The thing pulled the other side too. It used both hands, thumbs inside her mouth, fingers outside. It pulled her mouth into a smile, not a grin of happiness, a forced, ripped shape. The girl screamed through it, sound warped. Blood ran down her chin. The thing kept pulling until the skin split further, until her smile matched its own, wide and open and wrong. Then it held her face up and stared into her eyes. She sobbed, eyes darting. The thing didn't blink. It lifted its hands away. The girl's mouth stayed stretched, torn. She tried to close it. She couldn't. She made a horrible, wet, panting sound. The thing stepped back, and for the first time it seemed satisfied. It turned away from her. The girl sagged, shaking. Then her body jerked. A sound came from her throat like a cough. Blood bubbled at her lips. She coughed again and blood poured out, thick and dark. She tried to breathe. She couldn't. Her chest heaved. Her hands clawed at her own throat. She fell to her knees. She looked at me. Her eyes begged without words. I did nothing. That's the part I can't forgive myself for. I stood there and watched. The girl collapsed onto her side, still trying to breathe. Her eyes stayed open. Her mouth stayed forced open in that torn smile. She died with her face stuck in the thing's expression. The boy on the kitchen floor made a small sound, a wheeze. The thing walked over to him. It crouched and put its hand on his chest. It pressed. Not hard enough to crush, just enough. The boy's wheeze stopped. The thing stood. It looked at me again. It pointed up. 6th floor. I shook my head harder. No, I said out loud now. No, please. The word please tasted like garbage. The thing took one step toward me. I backed up. It took another step. I backed up until I hit the hallway wall. It was close enough that I could smell it like it was inside my mouth. Its eyes stared into mine. I looked for some hint of humanity in them. Anger, joy, madness, anything. There was nothing, just that flat, dark pupil and the wet shine. It spoke again, hoarse and calm. Up. I didn't move. The thing raised its hand. It touched my face. Its fingers were cold and dry, not like dead flesh, like chalk. It put its thumb at the corner of my mouth. My body reacted with pure panic. I jerked away, tried to bite, tried to pull free. Its grip tightened. It held my head still like I weighed nothing. It began to pull. Pain flashed hot at the corner of my mouth, skin stretching. I made a sound I didn't recognize. The thing stopped pulling. It stared into my eyes, and then it smiled wider. Yes, wider. Somehow, as if it was telling me it could do it, as if it was showing me exactly what would happen if I refused. It released me. I fell against the wall, hand clapped over my mouth. My lips were intact, but the corner was raw, stinging. The thing turned away. It started up the stairs. I followed because I didn't want it to come back to me. The sixth-floor hallway was quieter than the others. Fewer units. The owners had renovated it a few years ago. Newer doors, smoother carpet, nicer lighting. It felt like a different building. The people up there were the kind who complain about noise and take the elevator instead of the stairs. At the end of the hall was the penthouse unit, 6A, rented by a man named Calder. I'd met him once when his dishwasher flooded. He wore a watch that cost more than my car and talked to me like I was furniture. His door had a camera above it. A little ring camera pointed at the hall. As we stepped out of the stairwell, I heard it click. The camera activated. For a second, hope sparked in me. Proof. Someone would see this. The thing looked up at the camera. It stared at it. The camera lens fogged. The little blue light blinked once, then went dark. The thing walked toward Calder's door. It didn't knock. It reached out and pressed its palm against the door. The door handle turned by itself. The deadbolt clicked open. The door swung inward. Calder's apartment was bright inside, lit by big windows. I could see a spotless kitchen, expensive furniture, a white rug. Calder's voice came from somewhere inside. What the hell? He appeared in the living room doorway holding a phone. He saw the thing. He saw me behind it. His face tightened into anger before fear could catch up. "Who are you?" he barked. "Get out of my apartment." The thing walked in. Calder stepped back, still holding the phone up. "I'm calling the police," he said, voice sharp. He tapped the phone. Nothing happened. His anger wavered. "What did you do?" he said. The thing crossed the room toward him. Calder grabbed a heavy decorative object from a side table, some kind of stone sculpture. He swung it like a club. It hit the thing's head. The sound was like hitting damp wood. The thing's head turned slightly with the impact. It didn't fall. Calder swung again, harder. The sculpture shattered against the thing's cheek. Pieces clattered on the floor. Calder stared at the broken pieces, shocked. The thing stepped forward and took Calder's wrist. Calder tried to pull away. The thing lifted his wrist and bent it backward. Calder screamed. The bone snapped with a sound I'll never forget, like cracking a thick stick. Calder dropped the phone. The thing kept holding his wrist, twisting until Calder's hand flopped useless. Calder screamed again, choking on it. The thing pulled him closer. It put its open mouth next to Calder's ear, and it laughed. Not loud, not dramatic, just that low, amused sound. Calder's eyes went wide. He started sobbing. The sound stunned, like he couldn't believe this was happening to him. The thing lifted its other hand. It placed 2 fingers under Calder's lower eyelid. Calder froze. "No," he whispered. The thing pulled. The lower eyelid stretched. Calder screamed. The thing pulled harder. The skin tore. Calder thrashed. The thing held him steady. It didn't blink. It began to peel Calder's eye open wider, not removing it, making it open. Calder's eye bulged, tears streaming. Blood ran down his cheek. He screamed until his voice broke. The thing's fingers moved to the other eye. It did the same. Calder's face became a mask of torn lids and wide, forced-open eyes. The thing stepped back, still holding Calder's broken wrist. Calder stood trembling, eyes ruined and wide, mouth open in a silent sob. He couldn't blink. The torn lids wouldn't let him. His eyes dried in seconds, the surface dulling. He tried to squeeze them shut. He couldn't. The thing watched him like watching a candle burn. Calder made a sound like a whine. Then the thing yanked his arm. Calder stumbled forward. The thing guided him toward the big window. Calder's shoes slid on the white rug. He realized where he was going and began to fight. "Please," he cried, voice cracked. "Please, no." The thing's smile stayed open. It shoved. Calder hit the window. The glass didn't break at first. It flexed. Calder bounced back. The thing shoved again. This time the glass cracked, a spider web spreading. Calder screamed. The thing shoved a third time. The window gave. Glass exploded outward. Calder went through. He didn't fall cleanly. His body caught on the broken frame. His shirt snagged. His skin tore. He screamed as the glass cut him, slicing long ribbons. Then he went over. I heard his scream fade into the open air. Then a distant, final impact. Silence. The room smelled like money and then like blood. I stood frozen in the doorway. The thing turned away from the broken window. It looked at me. It pointed at the apartment. Then it pointed at me. And it spoke in that calm, hoarse voice. Clean. I stared at it. My brain tried to reject the word. Tried to pretend I'd misheard. Clean, it repeated. It walked past me, close enough that the death smell made my eyes water again. It went back into the hall. It stood there facing me, smiling, eyes open, waiting. It wanted me to clean up. It wanted me to make it look like an accident, like a crime scene, like anything that could be contained. I couldn't, but I also couldn't not. I walked into Calder's apartment. My shoes stuck slightly to the floor where blood had dropped from Calder's face. The white rug by the window was speckled with red and glittering with glass. Outside the broken window, the paused street was still empty and silent. No sirens. No voices. No cars. It was like the building had been cut out of the world. I found paper towels in the kitchen. I found a mop. I found a bucket. My hands moved. I wiped blood. I picked up glass. I did it like a machine, because if I stopped, I would scream. All the while, I could feel it in the hallway, waiting, smiling, watching. When I carried the first bag of glass out toward the trash chute, I saw what it had left behind on every floor. Lydia and the toddler on the second floor, their blood dried dark against the carpet. The toy in the doorway still playing a tinny song because it had a button stuck. Mr. Feld on the third floor, mouth ruined, eyes open. Mara and Jonas on the fourth floor, their apartment door still open. A trail of blood leading inside where the dog lay silent. The twins on the fifth floor, one on the kitchen floor, one on the living room carpet. her mouth torn into a forced smile. It hadn't killed quietly. It hadn't hidden. It had arranged, and it had left me to walk through it over and over. By the time I finished wiping the worst of the blood in Calder's place, my arms were trembling from effort and shock. I stepped back into the hall with the mop in my hands. The thing was still there, unblinking, smiling. It leaned forward slightly, as if smelling my hands. Then it turned and walked toward the stairwell. Relief surged in me, sharp and stupid. It was leaving. It was done. I took one step after it. The thing stopped. It looked back at me. It spoke one more word. Down. My throat tightened. Down. Back to the lower floors. Back to the bodies. Back to the empty unit. Back to the door that had never been locked from my side. It didn't need to say more. It started descending, and I followed. Because by then I understood the worst part. It wasn't hunting. It was working. And it had chosen me to be part of it. I'm writing this now in the boiler room, sitting on a dusty folding chair with my back against the water heater. The building is quiet above me in a way I've never heard before. Not sleepy quiet. Dead quiet. My phone has no signal. The front door won't open. The windows in the lobby show that paused street like a picture. Every so often I hear that wet shuffle in the stairwell. Up, down, like a metronome. Like it's pacing. Like it's making sure I don't forget. The corner of my mouth still stings where it touched me. I don't know how long I can stay down here. I don't know if it needs me alive or if it just wants me afraid. I do know one thing. It knows my name, and it never blinks.